Have you ever noticed how your mind feels quieter the moment you step outside? That's not a coincidence, and today we're talking about why. Hi, I'm Tim Collins and welcome to Adventure Mind. Today we're going to talk about how nature resets the brain. I'm about 10 concepts that I want to discuss and kind of talk about today on today's episode. And number one is that nature slows everything down. When you step outside, life instantly feels less rushed. The noise drops, the pace eases, and you can finally breathe. I have definitely found this to be true, especially camping, without really having an agenda and just puttering around camp, maybe collecting firewood, maybe building a fire, maybe cooking yourself a good meal, maybe relaxing and listening to an audiobook or a podcast, maybe reading a book, maybe just sitting by the water and pondering and reflecting on life. It really slows things down and puts things into perspective. And I find this to be so helpful for mental health, especially as someone who lives a fairly busy lifestyle, working, having a YouTube channel, having a new podcast that I'm doing, and having so much stuff going on. And even getting busy with, taking hikes that I want to take or vacations, like it's all busy. And sometimes you need to just slow down and reconnect with nature and just let your brain kind of catch up. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes we need to get out into nature and let everything kind of slow down and catch up to us. So for me, this is a big one. I love getting outside, even if I don't have the time to camp, because like I said, I can be pretty busy. But I took a 3-mile walk the other day in a park, like 10 minutes from my home, and it was perfect. It slowed things down. It put things into perspective. It had just rained in the desert, so it smelled just so incredible. It's like a really sweet, very distinct smell of rain in the desert. So I was enjoying that. I find camping to be the best version of this. The next thing is that it clears mental clutter. Being in nature helps quiet the constant thoughts, worries, and to-do lists that run in the background of your mind. I am a major overthinker, so this one definitely applies to me. I get so overwhelmed with thoughts of, the past or the future or things that I'm worried about, relationships that I have, just anything. I overthink everything, and it's so nice to get out into nature and kind of quiet that buzzing, and it just clears the mental clutter and puts things into perspective for me. I sit by the water and, at a park near home, watching the ducks swim by, and just kind of let my brain sort of quiet down and empty itself out. Is so valuable, and it's so easy to appreciate as someone who overthinks things and has a very active mind and imagination, imagining, different scenarios or whatever. It's really so nice and so refreshing to kind of get rid of all of that and just be okay and not be thinking constantly, or at least not thinking about things that don't really matter. Because being out in nature puts things into perspective. And I certainly do get a lot of thinking done when I'm out in nature, especially solo. When I don't have any distractions, I just kind of reflect on things and I think about things, but I think about things that are important and that actually matter. I'm not just busy with clutter in my brain. It's so nice to just think about things that matter. Maybe I have a big life decision that I'm trying to make or something to that effect, and it's just so nice to get out and just clear my mind and let myself think about things that are actually important, things that actually matter. So it definitely clears mental clutter for me. The next way that nature resets the brain is that fresh air shifts your mood. Just taking a walk outside can lift your spirits, help you feel lighter, and change the energy of your entire day. Definitely this applies to me. I spend a lot of time on the computer working and not being outside. So when I get the opportunity to go outside and breathe some fresh air, it is so incredible, so noticeable, the difference that it makes in my mood and overall well-being. Now, fortunately for me, I started a new job recently, and I am outside 100% of the time while I'm working, and that is just, it's so much better for me. I love working on the computer. I love editing videos and running a YouTube channel and a podcast and everything. I absolutely love it, but it's important for me to find balance and getting myself outside, breathing fresh air. And this new job has been perfect for that. I'm outside, I'm working, my mind kind of shuts down and I just do my job and I breathe fresh air, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely incredible. The weather's been really good this time of year in Arizona. It's the desert, late December. It's really beautiful this time of year. It's not too cold, not too hot. It's just right, maybe 80s, and get a little bit of rain recently. But for the most part, the weather's been really good lately and I've been enjoying that and breathing the fresh air. really just resets my whole mental state. So it's really important for me to find that, and I'm glad that I found that with the job that I have. And on the weekends I try to get out as much as I can, get to a park and take a little walk, or maybe do something a little more extreme, go for a bigger hike out in the wilderness, way out in the desert. The other day I was out by Tortilla Flats in Arizona in the Goldfield Mountains, which is becoming one of my favorite parts of Arizona, is the Goldfield Mountains. I love it because it is so unique. The rocks have kind of like this green moss on them, so it's very colorful there. And when you get up high in the Goldfield Mountains, you're looking at the Superstition Mountains, which are absolutely breathtaking and majestic and just so beautiful. So when you're in the Goldfields and you get to see that, you look back at the Superstition Mountains, it's just incredible. And the other day I went out there to the Goldfield Mountains, and it was maybe like a 6-mile dirt road to get to the trailhead. And then it was about a 2-mile hike up this goat path. I mean, it was barely even a trail. It was so rugged, so steep, just so challenging and difficult. But once you get to the top, you're just surrounded by wilderness. Like, there is nothing but mountains for as far as you can see in every direction. It's so incredible. So, sometimes it is doing something a little more extreme like that when I have the time, when I have the opportunity. But even if I can't do something that big, that epic, just getting out into the, local park or whatever, take a little walk, breathe a little fresh air, it all helps immensely. Okay, and the next way that nature resets your brain is that natural beauty changes your perspective. Big mountains, open skies, forests, or quiet water remind you that there's more to life than what's stressing you out. I love a good view. I will go way out of my way to find a nice view, particularly water in general. Anything with water, sitting by a lake, sitting by a pond, a river, a stream, especially a waterfall if I can find one. There's a couple waterfalls in Arizona I love visiting. I have definitely found this to apply to my life, is that natural beauty absolutely changes your perspective. Whatever you're worried about, whatever's bothering you in life, whatever issues or problems you have, when you get out into nature, it resets your perspective. And you can kind of zoom out a little bit and see that, like, we're on a planet right now, and some of the stuff that we worry about probably isn't as important as the weight that we give it. So seeing mountains, seeing beautiful scenery, wilderness, wild open spaces, it really puts things into perspective for me. And I can realize that, like, all right, this thing that I'm worried about, that I'm stressing about, that I'm spinning around in my mind, it really isn't that important in the grand scheme of things. Absolutely, seeing a good view really helps with this, and it's just enjoyable anyway. Like, who doesn't love a good view, Looking at stuff that's like, picture postcard scenery, and you're in it, you're immersed in it, you're a part of that scene, you are in the mountains. It really puts things into perspective, and I think it detracts from a lot of the negative things that we think about in our day-to-day life. Next is that nature pulls you into the present moment. When you're outdoors, it's easier to stay present, noticing sounds, colors, textures, rather than getting lost in your head. This is a pretty cool point here. It really does pull you into the moment. I used to be very big into riding motorcycles, and riding motorcycle is very easy to be 100% in the moment, because you kind of have to be, because there's an element of risk involved here. But riding a motorcycle and just cutting through the scene in nature, in the wilderness, in the backcountry, on a dirt road, it really pulls you into the present moment in a way that is just incredible. And it completely eliminates anything that you were dwelling on about the past or stressing about in the future. And I find the same thing with hiking, kayaking, even just sitting in nature and just being quiet. It pulls you into the moment. You notice a lot more. You notice the sounds, the birds, the wind blowing through the trees, maybe a babbling brook, one of my favorite sounds, or a campfire crackling and popping. It just pulls you in and makes you notice these things, even the colors. Like I was just talking about out in the Goldfield Mountains, you really notice the yellows and greens and tans and even blue and just all kinds of different colors, greens, everything. You really notice that a lot more out in nature than you would maybe sitting in a cubicle at work or commuting to work or whatever. It really just pulls you into the moment, and it's a really incredible gift, and it's worth going out into nature and finding that effect. Okay, and number 6, movement feels more natural. Walking, hiking, or even just standing in the sunshine helps release tension and shift your mental state. It is so important to move your body and get exercise and, use it or lose it, right? It's so important to move your body and keep things working in a healthy way. So hiking is a great example of this. Taking a stroll in nature, and maybe doing something even a little more difficult, hiking up a mountain, something of that nature. It really does so much for your mental health and your mental well-being. I absolutely love hiking. I found, motorcycling was really an amazing tool for me for mental health, but I found that hiking is even more so, because you're moving your body and you're exerting physical energy that you're not doing on a motorcycle. I still love the effects that I get from riding a motorcycle, but I found that hiking, it kind of goes even more in depth into that, as you're, moving yourself through an environment, and, your legs are exerting energy, your shoulders are carrying a pack, especially backpacking, like you're carrying, 20, 30 pounds worth of gear and water and food, and you're just making your way through nature. It really feels incredible, and I think it kind of taps into like these primal need to be on adventure and to struggle and to face difficult situations. So I think it's really cool. Get out and move and exert some energy in nature and do something difficult, push yourself. I recently got back from Everest Base Camp, and that was some serious exertion. I really pushed myself on that trip. I'm so glad that I did. It felt incredible. Not only in the moment, it was a struggle and it was very difficult, and mentally I had to push through that and convince myself to keep going, but it was such an amazing feeling to be moving my body of my own willpower up a mountain at high elevation, struggling to breathe, struggling to move my legs, and the feeling of accomplishment that comes after that, absolutely perfect. Just such an amazing reward for pushing yourself and doing something challenging. So yeah, movement definitely feels more natural. Number 7, it creates a sense of peace that you can't get indoors. There's something calming about wide open spaces that make the mind feel less crowded. This is interesting because for me, growing up on the East Coast in Massachusetts, being near the ocean, and then living in San Diego for a few years, being near the ocean, and then living in New York for a few years near the ocean. When I moved to Arizona, I really thought I was going to miss that. Just the way that the ocean is so immense and massive that it makes you feel so small. And it just something about the wide open nature of the ocean that I really thought I was going to miss out on, because it just did so much for me. Like just going, leaving work on a Tuesday afternoon, maybe it was a rough day, I just go sit in my car at the beach and just watch the waves, smell the salt air. Really did wonders for my mental health. And I really thought I was going to miss out on that. But I have found, living in Arizona, it's different, but you can still find wide open spaces, of course. Like there's tons of wide open spaces in Arizona. It's not quite the same as breathing in the salt air. It's a different sensation, but a very similar effect. It really gives you a sense of peace and calm and reminds you that you're on a planet. You're on a rock hurtling through space. Nature is more powerful than us, and I think it just kind of it just makes your mind feel less crowded, So I think it's a really beautiful thing. So yeah, it used to be the ocean for me, and I still love going out to San Diego or Rocky Point in Mexico. When I'm visiting family on the East Coast, I always make a point to go to the ocean and experience that and feel that smallness that comes from looking out at the ocean. But now living in Arizona, I find it in other ways, in other places, in the desert. And it's very easy to find wide open spaces in the Southwest of the United States, and it just puts things into perspective. It makes me feel really incredible to be in a place that makes me feel so small. Like I was saying, being on the Goldfields, being at the top of that mountain and just looking around 360 degrees, nothing but mountains, nothing but wide open spaces. There's no buildings, there's nothing. It's just wide open spaces, and it is just incredible. And it definitely creates a sense of peace that you don't get sitting indoors, watching TV, scrolling on your phone, anything of that nature. It's so important to get out to see some wide open spaces and just be in nature. It's just so important. Okay, and number 8, you feel more grounded and connected. Being outside helps you feel more rooted, stable, and connected to something bigger than yourself. This kind of goes in line with what I was just talking about, connecting to something bigger than yourself, getting out in nature and making yourself kind of feel small, but also a part of. You start to realize that like we belong in the natural world. We belong out in nature doing adventurous things. Like that's what we were born to do and evolved to do. All this other stuff It's just kind of made up along the way, jobs and being inside and all these different things. It's not natural. Yeah, being outside, I definitely feel more connected to the earth, especially walking in nature. And as I walk, I'll put my hands on maybe like a shrub that has a smell, and I'll, smell whatever the shrub is. The other day I was smelling something that smelled like eucalyptus. I'm not even sure what it actually was, but I would just rub it in my fingers and then smell my fingers. And um, you really just get so connected to, where you are and in nature and everything, especially connecting to something that makes you feel small and is something bigger than yourself, to realize that like we're on a planet, So yeah, I definitely feel more grounded when I'm out in nature, and I like to connect with it physically as much as possible. Like I said, smelling the plants with my fingers and, getting the oil of the plant on my fingers and smelling that is incredible. So there's smells, sights, there's sensations, there's changes in temperature. The other day I was out in the desert and it was kind of cloudy and the rain was rolling in, and you could feel the changes in temperature with that. And it all just makes me feel so much more connected and grounded and connected to nature. Definitely being out in nature, being on an adventure, you definitely feel more grounded and connected. And this is so, so important. Okay, and number 9, nature helps you reset your emotions. If you're overwhelmed, anxious, or frustrated, time outside gives you the space to process and settle your feelings. I can definitely relate to being overwhelmed and anxious and going out into nature and finding a cure for that. I get very overwhelmed. I take a lot on my plate, and I'm an overthinker, so that adds to my anxiety about the situation of overwhelm that I'm feeling. And getting out into nature 100%, it just helps. It helps so much. It resets your emotions. It takes the overwhelm and diminishes it almost to nothing. And, I rarely feel anxiety when I'm out in nature. What I do feel is that peace and calm and, content and relaxed, not feeling frustrated out in nature. Don't get me wrong, sometimes on a struggle adventure, you could definitely feel frustrated in certain situations, trying to set your tent up in the wind and the rain. Or trying to build a campfire with wet wood, hiking with a blister and still having to get back to civilization. There's so many things that could cause you frustration, but I think it's a healthy frustration. And as far as anxiety, I shouldn't say that I never feel anxiety in nature because I have a fear of heights. So, hiking in the Grand Canyon, for example, I'm hiking down into that canyon. There are a lot of like sharp drop-offs. That definitely gave me some anxiety. But I think it's like a healthy anxiety. It's not unhealthy anxiety that's just not beneficial and not for any real reason. It's not justified. Whereas, being on a cliff and looking down, hundreds of feet to the bottom, I think is a justified anxiety. And I think it's healthy. And I think it's good to feel that once in a while and kind of like put yourself out of your comfort zone and just embrace discomfort and anxiety about a dangerous situation that you're being safe about, but is also very dangerous, and people do get hurt doing that stuff. Fall all the time, in the Grand Canyon. I hear about that every year, somebody taking a selfie and falling down the canyon. So it definitely happens, but that anxiety, I feel like, is just so much healthier. And as far as feeling overwhelmed, yeah, sometimes I guess I could feel a little overwhelmed on an adventure if I maybe bite off more than I can chew. Definitely it can feel overwhelming. I could see that. But again, it's a healthy overwhelm. It's not overwhelmed from man-made stress, let's say. So yeah, I think nature definitely helps reset those emotions. You can still feel versions of them, but it's different than what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, feeling overwhelmed at work because you have too much to do and not enough time, feeling anxiety in whatever form in your day-to-day life, and feeling frustrated. Maybe, things aren't going your way all the time. All these things can be reset by just going out into nature and just chilling and just embracing, the peace and quiet of nature. It definitely gives you space out in nature to process and settle those feelings, and it gives you an opportunity to feel a healthier version of them, which I think is just as important. Okay, and number 10, it lets you escape the digital world. Stepping away from screens, even for a few minutes, helps your mind breathe and reconnect with what actually matters. I am definitely guilty of doom scrolling on Facebook or, even YouTube or Instagram. I'm not too much on Instagram. I do like Instagram. I just don't get on there very often for some reason. But Facebook in particular, in the last couple months, I really had a struggle with doom scrolling and just really needing to kind of break away from that and getting out into nature, taking a camping trip with no cell service and just trying to stay away from my screen. Sometimes I'll listen to a podcast or maybe I'll read a book on my phone while I'm at camp, but disconnecting from that screen I think is so important, and I really need to do more of this because I'm guilty of that. Even when I was in Nepal hiking to Everest Base Camp, I was watching movies at the end of the day on my phone just to chill and reset, and I think I really could have benefited maybe from less screen time on that trip. I wasn't mindlessly scrolling, I wasn't, falling down a rabbit hole of, internet slop, but I was on my screen, watching movies or whatever, or TV shows, which I don't think is as unhealthy and detrimental as doom scrolling. At least I wasn't doing that in Nepal, but I've actually been working on this with my therapist, not scrolling while I'm in bed, because I'm kind of got into a bad habit of scrolling before bed, and it would keep me up later than I should have been up, and it kind of makes me all wired and crazy before trying to go to sleep, and it just doesn't fit right, so I've gotten away from scrolling in bed and really cut down quite a bit on my scrolling in the last couple of weeks that I've been working with this new therapist. So that's been really great. But getting out into nature or on an adventure where you're distracted from that addiction of internet and screen time, I think is so valuable. Even if you can just do it for a few minutes, get out into your local park, sit by the water, and just put your phone away. Maybe leave it in your car and walk away. Go sit by the water for a while without even having your phone. Don't worry about taking pictures or, sharing that with somebody. Just keep it for yourself. I think it is so important to escape that digital world that we live in. It definitely helps reconnect with what really matters. So that's kind of the gist of it. Those are the 10 things that I think are examples of how nature helps reset the brain. I think I really have too much more to say about that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave a review if you found value in this. If you're over on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. If you agree with any of these or disagree, let me know what you think in the comments. And anyways, that is it for today. So thank you so much for being here and hearing my insights on how nature resets the brain. Thanks so much for being here, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.